Hurricane Ian heading for that Florida landfall in southwestern Florida, somewhere between Fort Myers and Tampa. Could be somewhere in between, like Port Charlotte or Punta Gorda. We're going to be checking all of the latest information out with regards to Ian as it has continued to strengthen rapidly. The pressures continue to fall, and we will cover all of the additional watches and warnings that have gone up, which include some watches up along the South Carolina coast, the implication for whether any of the rain from this winds up eventually moving through the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. All of that and more tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, at Southwest Suffolk County on Long Island. The Omni True Value Hardware services the entire New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, tri-state area with everything you need to make sure your home is functioning well and uh, it's going to keep you safe in case there's a tropical storm or hurricane. So if you need a new generator or sump pump, might be a good idea to get that now. And also make sure that you want your house to look great and your yard to look great. So mulch, topsoil, and of course, come wintertime, salt. 631-756-1125 is the telephone number, and the website is omnitruevalue.com. Good evening, everybody. I don't exactly know what is going on with Mr. Rayo, but he's not here. I am actually live on the Florida East Coast at Boynton Beach. I am not here, just so everybody knows. I don't know how many times I have said this, so I will just make it clear from the top of the show. I am not here chasing a hurricane. If I were, I would tell you. I'm here on family matters. It just sort of coincided, but I'm on the East Coast. If it were on the West Coast, I would not have come down, just so you know. I leave that for the younger folk to do the storm chasing. So I'm not sure why Joe Rayo has not joined us, but let me say in the meantime, a good evening to everybody on the chat board and everyone that is here tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. And we are on every day, well, 5 days a week anyway, Monday through Thursday at 7:30 Eastern Time, and on Sundays we are on at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. I'm trying to talk and do two things at the same time because Rayo's finally showed up, which is good. Hang on, Joe. Just got to do one more thing here, and we should be ready to go. And that's it. So now we're all set. So anyway, we're here. We're both here tonight. We're on Monday through Thursday at 7:30, Sundays at 11 a.m. And if there's a storm going on Friday or Saturday, we sometimes will come on and do a special show like we did last week. And also, if you do like the Joe and Joe Weather Show, by all means, hit the like button. We always like to get over 100 likes, which is really nice. And subscribe to my channel so that with your Gmail account so that you make sure you get all the latest updates. Okay, took care of all the nonsense at the beginning. So, Ian is, I think, outperforming today. It barely weakened when it was over Western Cuba, and the pressure, which I think got up to about 963 millibars before it moved off the west coast of Cuba, down to a 947 millibars. So it's getting borderline Category 4 hurricane here, Joe. That's about to go into the coast, and it's also moving east of due north, which the Hurricane Center's been extended the hurricane warning further south because it looks like now it'll probably come in somewhere. I'm thinking maybe around Port Charlotte or Punta Gorda, somewhere in there.
Well, it is going to eventually make landfall. And as we all know, it is going to bring a lot of problems in terms of coastal flooding, higher than normal water levels. Some cases, storm surge levels estimated to be 6 to 12 feet high. And we're going to show that in just a very few moments from the National Hurricane Center. Joe, historically, do you remember what happened on this date 37 years ago?
So 37 years ago, 22. So we're talking, what's that, 1995?
1985, sir.
1985 on September 27th, 1985. So I'm thinking that was, well, it wasn't, I don't know. I don't remember. It wasn't the Gloria anniversary because that was
It
earlier, wasn't it?
No, that was today's
Oh, it was
Hurricane
today. Okay.
Gloria on this day in 1985. And you talk about, the way the news media has latched on to Ian and making a big deal out of it. I think the news media was 2 or 3 times more for Gloria. If for nothing else, Gloria was on a path that took it right into, well, not New York City, but it hit right about where the Nassau-Suffolk County border is on Long Island. And the thing I always will remember about Gloria is the former head of the National Hurricane Center, Dr. Neil Frank, who literally just sat in a chair and did one TV interview or radio interview after another, after another, after another. I think it was something like 25 or 30 hours consecutive. He just sat there and probably answered the very same questions, probably said the very same things. And that was all happening 37 years ago. And it makes me wonder, Joe, if 37 years from today or 37 years from now, there'll be any of our younger friends out there who will look back and say, hey, I remember 2022. Yeah, Hurricane Ian. I remember that. It hit Florida. Anyway, these are all of historic nature. The other thing I remember about Gloria is a lot of people seemed PO'd in its aftermath. PO'd that there was not the cataclysm, there was not the tremendous damage or that was alluded to by Dr. Frank and also by the Hurricane Center and by the news media. People were, it seemed, actually disappointed that that Gloria did not live up to expectations. With that in mind, I'm hoping that the same thing happens with Ian, which, again, is bearing down on western Florida and will be there in the next 24 to 48 hours with the potential of a lot of real problems, maybe, catastrophic damage. In some cases, I'm hoping none of that amounts to a hill of beans. I'm hoping that it turns out to be less than what had been forecast. And if that happens, you'll indeed hear the people complaining about, well, why did they make such a big deal out of it on the news media? Why did they every channel was about Ian? I hope, in some ways, I hope that actually happens. We don't want to see tremendous damage. We don't want to see any fatalities. But it is a very dangerous storm. Better to be aware of the possibilities. And if you're watching us down in Florida right now, especially along the West Coast, don't try to ride this thing out. Get out as best you can. And as I said, hopefully this will not be as damaging as what it looks to us right now. Echoing, 37 years ago with Gloria.
Well, why don't you bring up did you bring up the surge maps?
I can do that.
Yeah, so go ahead. You already have the board ready to go, so just go ahead and bring up the surge maps. I'm going to fade myself off screen here, and the thing is, it's the angle at which Ian is coming in that is particularly the word I guess is disturbing because it's coming in such a way. The Florida coast runs virtually south southeast northwest. This thing, Ian, is coming in on a track right now that's east of due north. So all that water get squeezed. And remember, we're on the west side here of the state as opposed to being on the east side. So it's the south wind that's ahead of the storm, and that water is piling on into a really shrinking area of geography. And when it moves inland and it's moving north, it moves inland. That wind is only going to go from the south to the southwest to the west, which means more water gets to pile in even as the storm pulls away. So this is a different type of tidal flooding than what the folks on the East Coast are used to, because that is something that's coming up usually from south to north, or on the Florida East Coast. Sometimes they come in from the east, and those are particularly devastating if you're north of the center. But let's look at some of these storm surge numbers, Joe, and see what they're telling us here.
Well, the one thing that I find interesting before even talking about the West Coast is that the forecasts for parts of the eastern portion of Florida, going all the way up into the southeast coast of the U.S., Georgia, and even South Carolina. You can see up here we have. Let me just get rid of that there. We have, well, for example, if you're in the vicinity of the South Carolina coast, they have a storm surge of 2 to 4 feet along the Georgia coastline, 3 to 5 and 4 to 6 feet, and here in northeastern Florida and central eastern Florida, we have 1 to 3 feet from Patrick Air Force Base. That's also where Cape Canaveral is, and points north, and 3 to 5 feet up here. But it's the West Coast that's going to be dealing with the heaviest piling up, so to speak, of the water along the Keys, anywhere from 2 to 4 feet here. The Dry Tortugas, 3 to 5 foot inundation, if you will, 4 to 6 feet from East Cape Sable to Chocoloxy in Florida, and then from Chocoloxy to Bonita Beach, 6 to 9 feet. Bonita Beach to the middle of Longboat Key, 8 to 12 feet. Right here in the red, that's where the highest waters are expected.
Are you able to zoom in on that?
This is about as high up as I can get it. Actually, yeah, I can't really. Well, let me see if I can. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit more. Yes, I can. How's that?
Let's see. Yes, that is. There you go. Yep, perfect.
All right. So from Bonita Beach to the middle of Longboat Key, 8 to 12 foot water levels. Again, mainly due to the fact that because of the ongoing flow from the Gulf of Mexico, literally piling the water up. Joe, it was very interesting. I don't know if you saw it, or how many people on the chat board saw on the CBS Evening News. And now one of the partners on the CBS Evening News is the Weather Channel. And so they have meteorologists from the Weather Channel that are now providing information on the hurricane. I saw Jackie Jarris. I haven't seen Jackie in a while. She, for many years, was on CNN as one of their meteorologists. She's now at the Weather Channel. And another meteorologist whose name escapes me, but they have an interesting animation or simulation where this guy was standing on like a sandbar, and they're showing you the water levels that are rising all around him until finally it's like way over his head. And he's trying to tell people who live, I guess, up in the Tampa Bay area or in the place where the highest water heights are expected. He said, you don't want to be here. You don't want to be here when the waters reach their peak 8 to 12 feet above sea level. Then north of middle of Longboat Key, including the Tampa Bay area, 4 to 6 foot wave heights. Further north up to Swanee River, and we all know Swanee River was written by Ed Norton, 3 to 5 foot heights, and further north up toward the Panhandle from Swanee River to Indian Pass, 1 to 3 foot heights. So very, very significant water levels. And as you can see here, on the information here at the bottom, water levels along the immediate coast could reach the following heights above ground level within the indicated areas. Elevated water levels will likely be accompanied by large and destructive waves, and the colors determined by the highest values in the associated forecast peak surge. So there you go. That's the story on the expected water levels, on the expected heights of the water, right on through the next 24 to 48 hours as Ian eventually makes landfall somewhere along the west coast of Florida.
All right. Now the 7 o'clock position, and I'm going to pull up the Key West radar in a second here. 24.3 north, 83.1 west, moving north at 10, and they're carrying 010 or 10 degrees. So it's slightly east of due north at 10 miles an hour, and the pressure since the advisory, which I believe they had it at 952, is now at 947, still carrying winds of 120 miles an hour. But with the pressure falling, you have to wonder whether they may nudge them up if they are justified in that. So let me bring up the I got the Key West radar all set to go, and I picked the Key West radar because the eye is obvious here. You can see the banded nature of a hurricane, where you get these really powerful bands that produce very heavy rains and very strong wind gusts, and then you get a bit of a lull in between, and then you get another band and a little lull in between. Now, I am just outside. I'm in Boynton Beach, which is just outside the range of the Key West radar. And we actually had some heavy bands of rain go through here on and off all day long. It has since calmed down a bit as all the action now is shifting a bit to the west as the storm continues to move northward. So as it gains latitude, there's a little more distance between the bands on the east coast. But when they come in, the winds gust into the 30-mile-an-hour plus range, at least from what I experienced here. And as I said, we had some heavy downpours, but it's the worst of this is now beginning to approach the coast, and the radar presentation here of the eye, Joe, is pretty impressive.
It is. You can see it quite clearly on the radar, and yeah, it seems to be moving. What, 010 or 020, not directly due north. 010. Yeah, and you could see that for yourself right on the radar right now, and whether or not it will continue moving along that, or whether it'll turn a little bit more to the east, or maybe go back a little bit to the west, that is yet to be seen. But it does mean that if you're along the west coast of Florida, batten down for lots of wind and lots of rain in the coming hours.
The satellite loop, one of the things I'm noticing here, because I've been really liking the idea of using this particular satellite loop where you can actually see the lightning strikes. And in a tropical storm, they tell you a lot. And if you'll notice, Joe, there's been a lot of bursting of thunderstorms going on near the center. Now, one of the things that we're going to have to watch for, this makes forecasting landfall and what to expect in a landfall very tricky, because we're in a deepening or an intensification phase that began this morning when the storm when Ian moved off the west coast of Florida, off the western part of Cuba, the northwest coast there, moved off, started to strengthen again. So we've seen the pressure continuing to drop at a rate of about 1 to 2 millibars an hour. So 2 millibars an hour is considered rapid strengthening. And at some point, that strengthening is going to level off, and we're going to go through what's known as an eye wall replacement cycle. The thunderstorms that develop peak in intensity, and then the eye wall just falls apart, and then a new eye wall forms. And while that happens, you get fluctuations in strength, where the storm could actually weaken a bit until the new eye wall is replaced, and then it might start strengthening again, depending on whatever other parameters are going on. I'm not seeing an eye wall replacement cycle starting yet, but with a little luck, Joe, you get that eye wall replacement cycle to get underway as it's approaching the coast. That might at least, nudge it down a little bit before landfall, which would be a good thing. On the other side of this, I'm just kind of looking at this now, and I apologize for the flashes, just trying to load all the frames in here, and it just when the frames don't all come in at the same time, you get these blanks, and that's what those white flashes are. But I'm kind of noticing that the eye is getting smaller, very, very tight. So I'm going to be curious to see what they carry as a pressure if it's down less than the 947 that they reported at 7 o'clock. I mean, it doesn't look like it's done deepening yet.
That's akin to a skater, for example, a skater who is on the ice spinning round and round, and as that skater increases its speed and either he or she is spinning more rapidly, it's kind of like akin to watching the eye get smaller and smaller, even though the sustained winds around the outside of the eye wall are increasing, and that may be what's happening right now. By the way, I'm going to check this out here for a moment. I'm going to go to see if I can pick up. Ooh, this. Ooh, all
Yeah.
right. So I've got something here that might look very interesting.
All right,
So
so hang on. Let's get you back up on the screen. Go ahead.
okay, how do you like that? This is long wave infrared,
Very nice.
and look, and you could see look at the. I presume these are the cold cloud tops associated with convection that are just blossoming immediately outside of the eye. Here's the eye, obviously, and now the
Look how small the eye has gotten. It's getting
yes,
tighter and tighter.
indeed. Look at that. That is really, and Key West, the Florida Keys points the way now to the eye of the storm. Look at that. That really is something. That's quite dramatic, actually. And
The
so that's the very late. That's a 6-hour loop, by the way, Joe.
All right, so we're holding that loop on the screen. So I'll give you everybody the 8 o'clock advisory that just literally came out moments ago. 24.4 north, 83.0 west. That's about 180 miles south southwest of Punta Gorda, Florida, or about 20 miles south southwest of the not so dry Tortugas.
Well,
The dry Tortugas. Maximum sustained winds, they're carrying 120 miles an hour. Present movement now 015, 015, north
now here,
northeast at 10, and
I,
947 millibars, 2796 is the pressure.
now where my arrow and where my cursor is pointing, I'm believing that that's where the dry Tortugas is. And if that be the case, they're not very dry right now. You
Right.
can be rest assured. and yeah,
Looks
it's
like
not going to go.
the eye looks like it may have gone. It may go right. Is going right over the dry Tortugas.
It looks like it, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I hope, man, the Weather Service, you'll probably, if there's a station on there, I'm sure if there's a report, they're going to pass it along.
Right.
Actually, Joe, that might have, I'm sorry to say this, but I mean, that might have been your mouse that was sitting up there on the screen as the dry Tortugas.
No, my mouse is right here, Joe.
Oh, okay, so, oh, I see where it is now. Yeah, no, that was I lost it in the light. Okay, so see if you can pull up while you're pulling up. Can you pull up some radars? So
Yes.
if you can, so
Yes.
let's start with pull up go to Miami, Melbourne, and then Tampa. And while you're doing that, I'm going to just go read through on the advisory some of the changes that occurred at 5 o'clock with all these added warnings that are up.
Well, here's
So
the Miami radar, and you can see quite plainly that the East Coast is not quite as enveloped in all of this as the West Coast, although there are a few heavy bands associated with the hurricane that are making their way northward along the East Coast. But much of the rain, much of the shower activity appears to be over the western part of Florida. And that would include, you can see these blips of yellow and orange and the occasional shade of red, which indicates heavy to maybe even torrential tropical downpours. So that's Miami. Let's try. Let's look at Melbourne here. And again, you could see that here's Cape Canaveral right here. Orlando is over here. And again, you could see that some of these outlying bands from the hurricane are working their way up along the coast of Florida, the east coast of Florida, but much of the activity is again over central and western Florida, where the area is more solid, and also showing more areas of heavy activity occurring. So that was Melbourne. Let's go down to the Keys.
all right, so
And
put the keys.
there,
Hold on a second.
yeah,
You go to the keys with the radar up. I just want to run through these really quick. So some of the additional tropical storm warnings that were put up, or tropical storm watches, in effect for um, the coastline going up into South Carolina. So from Altamaha Sound to the South Santee River. and we also have um, tropical storm warnings that were extended in both directions. Did you run through these at the beginning, Joe? I don't remember. You did run through some of this. I don't remember what you ran through these.
I ran through the storm surge data, but no, not
Okay, so the tropical hurricane warnings from how did you say that? Chocoloxy?
whatever.
Yeah, to the Anclote River, including the Tampa Bay and the Dry Tortugas. So the warning was actually extended further south into Southwest Florida. In fact, the whole peninsula is either under a tropical storm warning or a hurricane warning, with the exception of a small portion of the western part of the Florida Panhandle. That pretty much kind of sums it up in terms of what's happening. And then we have tropical storm watches that are up now from the Georgia and into the South Carolina coastline for the possibility that this thing could emerge on the other side briefly and then go make a second landfall somewhere in that coastline as a weakened system, but nonetheless going out and then coming back in. And we're going to get to that momentarily. Now, back to the Key West radar.
Well, the Key West radar plainly shows the eye of the storm, and if you can't see it or can't make it out, it's right there. It's pretty hard not to notice it. And you can see the spiral heavy-duty rain bands whirling around the eye. This is one of my professors at City College here in New York used to refer to this as the Coliseum of rain and clouds. And this indeed is a coliseum of very, very adverse weather that is immediately entrenched around the eye as the eye progresses on that 0-15 degree movement to the north-northeast. And again, you can see the outer bands are moving up and across eastern sections of the Florida coast. But again, the main area of rain and shower activity is occurring right along the west coast of Florida. Any other locations that you want to?
Well, before you change this, since we can see the Florida coastline, I just want to go back over what I was saying before. So if we're moving this at 010, roughly, just sort of an estimate here, you can see where I've got the arrow pointed to on the Florida coast, and I'm thinking that is just north of Fort Myers. I can't, it's hard for me to pick out the exact points, but it's definitely south of Tampa Bay. But what I was getting at is that if this is the track 010, the winds on the east side are all coming up from the south. So all this water is just piling in here. And with the storm tracking the way it is, that water really doesn't have any place to go. And I'm talking about in terms of the tidal surge. Now, on the other side of this is that when it makes landfall, so let's say it makes landfall here, somewhere north of Fort Myers or somewhere near Port Charlotte, for example, the winds on the south side, this whole area here that just got all this water piled onto it with the south wind, is now going to experience a west wind. So that water with the west wind now can't get out. It just adds to it. It's not just one tide cycle, and it's not just essentially one and done with the storm going inland and that's it. But because of how it's coming in, and the fact that we're looking at the west side of the state, and this is coming. The opposite would be occurring if this were on the east coast and it were coming in from the east. You'd have the same result, just different wind direct. We'd be talking in different directions, but you'd have the same results. And this is a problem. This is an issue. Okay.
Joe, the on the screen I've been showing for the last few minutes the radar from Tampa. I think you've been saying that you've been showing maps, but you still have my screen up
all
there.
Right, that's fine. But that's fine. Go ahead. It's my fault.
I was just saying that if you wanted to show some of the information that you were describing that was not up on the screen, you can do that. But
okay. Well, after you do yours, I'll switch it back.
Well, again, this is the radar from Tampa, St. Pete, and you can see, interestingly enough, that to the north there's not really much to talk about. There's not as at this moment in time, not really any significant precipitation falling in north of Central Florida. It is from Central Florida on south that is seeing all this activity from the approaching hurricane, and Ian is especially hitting southwestern Florida down here toward Fort Myers, for example, with again bands of moderate to heavy to even torrential rainfall. And again, down here, this is the region. If you can see my cursor here, this is the area down here where the expectation is for the highest water levels of anywhere from 8 to 12 feet at maximum. And this is the zone that's going to be probably hit the hardest by Ian as it continues to plod northward. And there's not really much more I can add to that.
All right. Now, this worked out well because I decided to use I'll use the Tampa radar because I think that probably works a bit better. So the landfall earlier today was for the Hurricane Center was talking about was maybe near Venice. But because of this more easterly movement, it brings the landfall down further south to the Port Charlotte area, just north of, say, Fort Myers. And as I was trying to illustrate here, so if you have a storm that is going in, we'll get rid of one of these arrows. Let's just leave the second arrow up as the possible track. So the area to the north of this, whoops, there we go. The area to the north of this is going to be experiencing mostly east winds. So that kind of pushes the water out. But to the south of that, the winds are going to be southeast and south, so the water piles onto the coast. And then as the storm moves inland, what happens? Well, now the winds start to shift because you're south of the storm center with the counterclockwise circulation. So what kind of a wind do you have? But from the west, and that brings even more water piling onto the coast. So storm surge, and the other thing we haven't even talked about, Joe, is the fact that the very, very slow movement of this is going to result in very heavy rains. At WPC, if you draw a line from just north of Port Charlotte to Orlando to the coast, to the Atlantic coast, from there northward in that purple band, which includes Tampa Bay, by the way, and a lot of the I-4 corridor, we're talking 15 to 20 inches of rain. So rain may wind up being the bigger deal here. If you want to rank things, if you want to rank it, I'm going to say, and all three things obviously are potentially destructive. Wind would be the number three. The number two will probably be storm surge, and then number one I think rainfall is going to be the bigger story here, especially once inland and the very slow movement. Some of these places are going to get clobbered with a ton of water.
Well, that's, the unfortunate thing is that up until just a few hours ago, the rainfall forecast had a lot of that, what do you call it, purple or salmon colored or whatever, at the west coast of Florida or chiefly offshore. Now, unfortunately, with the new updated track, that area of very heavy rainfall has now been shifted to almost diagonally right across northern or north central Florida, 15 to 20 inches. I mean, that's insane. I not to say that I haven't seen that. We have seen that up here. We saw that with Floyd back in 1999, and especially so, I can tell you that we did get at least a foot of rain where I'm talking to you right now here in Putnam Valley. We got a foot of rain here with Irene back. I can't even believe it's been 11 years ago. It seems like only a few years ago that happened, but in 2011. So I can tell all of you from experience that when you get that much rain, and here we are talking about 15 to 20 inches, I mean, that ain't fun, folks. That's not, I mean, that means that there may be places down there that are going to be waterlogged for many, many, many days after the passage of the storm.
Oh, by the way, we just saw it with Fiona in Puerto Rico, so with 2 feet of rain or more.
Right.
And
right.
and so here's WPC's I got to give WPC a lot of credit here because if you follow just if you looked at nothing else but their rainfall maps, they were implying more of a track east of the Apple. If you want to just use a broad location, we've been talking about whether this is going to go west of the Appalachians or east of the Appalachians with respect to the East Coast. WPC for many days now has been going east of the Appalachians, even though a lot of the model guidance has been going west. And it's looking more and more like they may be correct here. And they're pushing significant rains in the so anything in the orange would be 5 inches or more, and you've got patches of that into Virginia, North Carolina. You see down, of course, you go down to Florida, you get into those oranges where you're talking about 7, 10 inches plus, and in that yellow area, it's 15 inches plus across much of central and northern Florida. That's the area that's going to get hit hardest. 2-inch rains. The northern edge gets just about touching Cape May in New Jersey, Delaware, the Delmarva Peninsula into Maryland, and then you see the sharp cutoff. The blue, the bright blue, is basically 1.25 inches or less. The darker green is a 0.5 inch, and that gets to just about to New York City and Long Island. And this is the 7-day rainfall forecast that carries through next Tuesday. But we're talking significant rains for the coastal mid-Atlantic, for the southeast, and for Florida. And as far as how far north this gets, I'm starting to think, Joe, that the jury is out as to how far north it gets. A lot really is going to depend on the big high that's going to be to our north and whether it's going to act as a way of suppressing this rain southward. And we may not know that for another few days, whether it's going to win that battle or not.
Yeah, that big high is something that is going to be difficult to nudge, away for Ian or the remnants thereof of Ian as it's coming northward, and it makes it difficult. It kind of reminds me of the wintertime forecast when we have those very sharp cutoff to the heavy snow line because again of a big high to the north and the storm trying to push in from the south. So we'll see how this all pans out. What I will say, Joe, is that even if we do get rain here in the immediate tri-state area, it's not going to be anything like some of the tremendous rains that we've seen from other tropical systems. Ida, most notably, from just last year, or a Floyd, or Irene. We're not looking for the potential of 6 to 8, or 8 to 10, or 10 to 12 inches out of this. We might get, an inch, let's say, from New York on south. Hey, look, where I live, I'm 50 miles north of Midtown Manhattan. It's quite possible. It's quite possible I might not see much more than a few drops out of Ian or Ian's remnants later on the weekend or early next week. Something to watch again, because things can change. I mean, look how much things have changed in the last 24 hours. The storm now may very well take a track so far to the east that it may actually emerge out over the Atlantic coast. And yesterday it looked like, based upon a consensus of at least the GFS and the European, that it would stay on the west coast of Florida and make landfall near Cedar Key. That's off the table right now. But who's to say that tomorrow it may not change back to the west?
It's hard to imagine at that point that we're all of a sudden going to get a track way to the west. So I'm just saying. But
yeah, I mean, but these things wobble. Even within a day or two, you have significant changes, and we've seen that happen, and we'll see more significant changes maybe over the next day or two with Ian as it approaches the Florida coast.
By the way, on the radar that I have up on the screen right now, which is the full U.S. view, and I'm zoomed in on the southeast, those red boxes you see are actually tornado warnings that have gone up for various counties in South Florida with some of these bands, and I'm sure we're probably going to see, along with various flash flood warnings that'll go up, you probably will see some tornadic activity out of this, and the eye very well defined on this radar view, and you can see where the rain cuts off just north of I-4. It's mostly where you see in the blue and those light green areas, much of that the rain is not reaching the ground because remember, there's a ton of dry air coming down the eastern seaboard, where we're going to see ridiculously low dew points in the Florida Panhandle, in much of the southeast U.S., and of course up in the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast. That's something that also, this thing is going to fight into for a while. So it'll be interesting to see how far north the precip gets and how long it takes for it to get there because of the high dew points. Meanwhile, just want to emphasize that we still are dealing with these upper troughs coming through the Great Lakes and Northeast. With this big upper low in southeastern Canada, and we're seeing some downpours and probably even a couple of thunderstorms here in the mix and around Syracuse this evening. Also in the Catskills, seeing some rain showers. This would be something maybe a month from now, if we were getting the same thing, probably somebody would be seeing some snow out of this. Also some showers up in the northern lakes, seeing a little bit of some shower activity in eastern Colorado, and a little bit of action going on in the Southwest. Just wanted to see a quick check here, the recon that's been in there, see if they've come up with another fix. And I'm not seeing. There's that one fix at 949. The plane is now somewhere between. Looks like it's just north of the plane is actually overhead in Miami, so I'm not sure what exactly they're doing, but that's where the plane icon is. And I'm going to check the graph, and the graph is really not telling us very much. Is there a new mission there may be a new mission that's headed out there, and there's a new plane that just left. It's up at 30.3 north and 88.9 west, which means that the plane just left Biloxi and is on its way to check out Ian. So on that particular note, just really quick, here's again the Hurricane Center's forecast with the major hurricane to the coast by 2 p.m. Wednesday, then inland, going northeastward, coming out somewhere between Cape Canaveral and Jacksonville, and then they have it curling northward to the Georgia coast, but it is conceivable that it could go out a little bit further. And I think that's why they have the yellow area here with the tropical storm watches that they've extended from the eastern part of the Georgia coast and into South Carolina. You notice the blue, that's all tropical storm warnings. As we said, the whole peninsula of Florida, except the small portion of the northwest, is under some kind of warning, either a tropical storm warning in the blue or the hurricane warnings that we see in the red. So let's try to guidance this out and see what Mansour GFS and Mansour European have to say with regards to all this, Joe. And one of the first things is this deep trough in the northeast. You could see Ian, Ian. I keep saying I wanted to say Ian because I have a friend, because I don't know if you worked with Ian Rubin, but it's spelled Ian, but it's pronounced
Yeah.
Ian. Okay, so anyway, it's Ian. So you see the upper trough that's in the northeast now, pulling this northeastward, and then that trough weakens and starts to lift out, and that leaves Ian in, I guess, in an upper air no man's land, because if you look at the flow here, the northern part of the jet is way north. This is by the time we get to Friday. That's how much that trough pulls out. So the northern part of the jet is there, and then there's this sort of weak southern part here in which the hurricane is trapped in. So it needs to wait for something to come down and force it to do either go north or northwest. And at least from the standpoint of the GFS, it actually wants to take the feature initially to the northwest into the western Carolinas before it finally, there's enough going on to the west early next week where it gets kicked out eastward. And there you see this trough that comes out of the northern plains early next week and then kicks it along to the east. But there's so much variability here, Joe. There's so much room. Who's to say that the upper low goes up into western North Carolina? It could easily be in eastern South Carolina with the tropical system somewhere near Charleston. There's a lot of room here for error with regards to where this thing could go forecast-wise. And the GFS, if you want to believe it, I think it's one of many possibilities. Here it matches up actually fairly well with what the Hurricane Center did, and I'll just roll it back. That landfall somewhere, Punta Gorda, Port Charlotte, somewhere in there, and then across the state, coming out the other side, north of Cape Canaveral or north of Daytona Beach, south of Jacksonville, then just east of Jacksonville by Friday afternoon, going back inland into South Carolina sometime Friday evening or early Saturday morning, and you see it it's trying to push the rain up the coast by Saturday afternoon, Joe, to Long Island, New Jersey, New York City, almost to the Catskills. I'm not sure. I don't know. There's that big high to the north. There's a lot of dry air. A lot of this could wind up getting suppressed and take longer and longer to move northward. So I'm kind of dubious on the weekend as far as what to do. But for now, I'm going to play it. I'm going to play that Saturday should be okay, and that maybe by Sunday the rain gets in here.
The key to just whether or not the tri-state New York City area gets anything from Ian's remnants is going to be the fact is that we do have a big high pressure system that's building in over the Northeast starting tomorrow and lasting into Friday. And then it kind of deflates, if you will, like a balloon. And Ian or Ian's remnants probably say, oh, good. Now that high is weakening, it'll be a chance for pushing all of that rain up into the Northeast. But before that has a chance to happen, another significant high-pressure cell from Canada is dropping on down toward the Northeast and is sort of reinforcing the dry air over the northeastern states. So there's going to be a period between the time that the first high weakens and the second high from Canada moves in. There's going to be a period where there's just going to be enough weakening to allow for some of that moisture to get maybe as far north as New York or a little beyond. That would probably be on Sunday. And then that new high-pressure system from Canada, the second high, probably expands and pushes whatever moisture that has been brought into our area by Ian back out to the south and out over the ocean. So that's going to be the key to whether or not we do see anything, how quickly that first high pressure cell over the Northeast deflates and how quickly the new high coming down from Ontario and Quebec and pushing down into the northeastern states arrives to try to reinforce the block, so to speak, and keep a lot of that rain and wetness from Ian or Ian's remnants from making their way into the New York City metropolitan area.
Yeah, you see there's that high, the first high on Friday, and you're right, it deflates, but there's another high that builds in, and yeah, this is going to be a challenging forecast with regards to how far, aside from the challenge that's already on the table with figuring out, okay, where is it going to make landfall? Is it going to come out the other side? What's it going to do after it comes out the other side? There's one set of challenges, and then whatever the outcome is of all of that, at the end of the day, will probably help determine how far north the rain gets. And one of the things to remember, folks, is that with respect to the storms that Joe mentioned earlier that produced big, heavy rains in the northern mid-Atlantic and on up into parts of the Northeast from these tropical systems, in every one of those cases, it's been about the core of the storm holding together, particularly when you look at something like last year with Ida. I mean, after it came inland in southwest Louisiana, you had the core just was intact all the way up through the Ohio Valley and then moved overhead and got a little bit of extra juice from a shortwave trough in the upper atmosphere. You don't seem to have that here. In fact, if you look at how the GFS handles this, the core comes in, but then the core goes up into the Appalachians, and then the rain that's on the east side becomes almost a separate feature and gets pushed on out to the east-northeast. So that, to me, suggests that we would never get into that we would, I don't want to say never, that's probably the wrong word. It's a low probability that we would get into something that would produce many inches of rain. Could we get into a situation where some areas could see a couple of inches of rain or maybe a little bit more than that? Sure. But if we're going to see something that is really going to be problematic, you're going to need to see the core hold together as it comes up, either comes up the east side of the Appalachians or comes up along the coastal plain. Right now, it's not. That's not really being indicated. It is being indicated perhaps for the Delmarva Peninsula in some of that breakaway rain that they get into. But if you got to get that core to be part of the equation, and if it goes one way and then you get a body of rain that goes another way, it takes a let's put it this way, it takes the idea of a monumental rainfall off the table if the two areas are separate.
Yes, I agree. And a lot of people on the chat board, Joe, have been singing the praises of the Icon model. Maybe it might be worthwhile to bring that up and take a look and see what the Icon is doing with this particular nasty system.
Let's take a look. I have been sort of looking at it back and forth. Now, I'm already going to tell you, if the Icon is right, I mean, just that's 120 hours, then we may be talking about the core holding together, because it not only brings it, now it takes it just to make sure it's consistent. So it takes it right over Port Charlotte, and then comes out the other side, near or just north of Daytona Beach, and then it actually goes a fair distance offshore and deepens on the Icon, Joe. It goes back, the pressure, it comes out at 986, and then it's off the South Carolina coast. It's down to 953. So it deepens if the Icon is right, and actually goes in as a Category 3 hurricane at Charleston. And then the core goes up into western North Carolina. You've got rain knocking on the door at New York City by Saturday afternoon, or at least one band of rain going by. And the core goes up into the central Appalachians. And all of a sudden now it looks like a winter system. You've got a low in eastern North Carolina. You've got one off the Jersey coast. I mean, this is really kind of odd. It's an oddball setup. But look, I wouldn't discount it. I would not discount the idea of something coming off the Florida coast and going out far enough where it could conceivably strengthen again before it turns back toward the coast. Because it's going to have to turn back because of the big ridge that's offshore and building around it.
Right. The best case scenario for us up here in the Northeast is for the thing to just maybe have it to stick its toe in the Atlantic Ocean for a very short interval of time and then turn back to the northwest out across Georgia and South Carolina and go back inland. If that thing goes way well offshore and then curves back around and make landfall a la, near Charleston, now you're starting to think about Hugo from the late 1980s.
Well, what you just described is what the European did, which is to take it across, but leave it right along or just barely offshore, where it goes back in Georgia and then goes northwest into eastern Tennessee, where the core goes northwest in eastern Tennessee, and some of the rain along the coast and some old frontal boundary that's sitting out in the ocean, that rain gets lifted up the coast during the day on Saturday and barely makes it to New York City and Long Island, because it gets, from there, that next high is building rapidly southeastward and forcing all the precip out to the east.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. We're really not going to have, relative to our local weather and the effects of Ian or Ian's remnants, we're really not going to have a really good handle until probably Thursday or Friday. We're going to have to literally wait for the storm and see exactly how it enters the Florida Peninsula and whether or not it gets back out over the ocean and whether or not it goes back inland again. All of these questions, because we've got so many different model guidance proposals here as to where this thing is going to go from tomorrow on through the end of the week. So until we have a very good handle, a good solid idea as to where Ian is going, all I could tell you is for our weather this upcoming weekend is it's either going to stay just barely to the south of New York City, or maybe the rain will come up and cover us for a day or so, and that would probably be, let's say, later Saturday into Sunday. Again, regardless, if we do get rain out of this, it will be just some rain. We're not going to see anything really solid in terms of 3, 4, 5, 6 inches. Nothing really tremendous or heavy here. And the executive producer, Joe, just has come down to remind me that we did have super chat hits from Steve Lapointe, from Ma Fire 924, and Helen Bertona.
Yes.
Thank you, three, for hitting super chat tonight.
Oh, and this is one of those, whenever we get like this, there's always somebody, and I'm reading the deleted messages from some moron who apparently has, needs attention. Oh, they're too funny. It brings out all the crazy people. 113 likes. Thank you so much for those of you who hit the like button. It is most appreciated. And if you haven't hit the like button, by all means do. If you haven't subscribed, just hit the subscribe button on my YouTube channel so that you get notifications every time we're on. Because you know what, Joe? We are on Monday through Thursday at 7:30. We're on Sundays at 11. And every once in a while when there's a storm going on, we are on Friday and Saturday, and we let people know about that. Leon Probitsky, the latest person to hit the Super Chat tip jar. By the way, if you're watching this on a replay and you feel like, oh, God, we should give them a tip because those poor guys haven't had dinner in quite a while, you can do that by hitting the Super Thanks. Which is also available, and you can feed the tip jar that way, but no obligation. I'm trying to think of anything else I wanted to add to this. Now, we usually do Briller Jeopardy at the end of the show, but I'm kind of exhausted today because I've been doing a lot of driving these last 3 days to come down from Georgia to Florida. And by the way, to repeat, because apparently, Joe, somebody was spreading a rumor on Twitter that I was down here to storm chase. I don't know why everybody seems to be obsessed over the idea that I'm storm chasing. I'm not storm chasing. If I were storm chasing, I would be on the west coast of Florida. I'm on the east coast of Florida. I've got family issues to take care of. So that's why I'm here. It just happened to be at the same time that we got, because look, if this were the winter time and I had to come up to New York, I guarantee you there would be a snowstorm going on because it needs to get in the way of whatever it is I need to do. So it's not inconceivable that there would have been a hurricane on this date because these things happen to me for some reason. Anyhow, I'm here, but I'm not chasing, and I'm not going to chase, and that's all there is to it. So let's hold Briller Jeopardy. We'll do it tomorrow if time permits. And I want to get some sleep.
Okay. And Jose Garcia on our chat board says, gentlemen, please get your hands on the book called Cold Sun by Dr. John L. Casey. What's happening now was predicted on the book by Dr. Casey. I presume that has something to do with the grand solar minimum and its possible effects on the climate and on weather, which is a very contentious issue. And, well, anyway.
I don't know who Dr. John Casey is. Do you?
No, I knew his brother, Ben Casey. I used to watch Ben, in the 60s on the Channel 7, but no, I
go back further with the movies with Lou Ayres.
Lou Ayres, that's right.
Brandon Doherty said, I know he means, because I know Brandon, he means this as a compliment. He says, I am the Reed Timer, R-E-E-D, or Timmer, Reed Timmer of the Joe and Joe Show. I don't know who Reed Timmer is. Do you, Joe?
I have no idea.
Okay, but I take it as a compliment, so I'll Google it after we're off the air and check. But thank you, Brandon, because I know you mean it in a good way.
Oh, wait a minute. Reed Timmer, Dr. Reed Timmer, Ph.D., is an American meteorologist and storm chaser. He is known for starring in the Discovery Channel reality television series Storm Chasers, as well as in the documentary film Tornado Glory, and in the series Tornado Chasers. So that's who Reed Timmer is.
I appreciate the comparison, but I'm not doing any chasing, so we're not I'm not in his league. He's many pay grades above me. So, but thank you anyway. Most appreciated.
Here's something to make you feel good, Joe. Reed Timmer, born March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, 1980. I'm just laughing because I was already doing this for like 2 years. And I know you were doing this for about 2-3 years already in 1980.
He's old enough to be our younger brother.
Yes.
Barely.
Yes. Well, or maybe even a son. I mean, if I were married a few years more, it's conceivably could have been my son. Anyway, there you go.
All right. Well, we better move on. By the way, I have no problem with people who storm chase. I think it's wonderful that they're so passionate and that's what they do. Just use your head. Don't do anything that's going to get yourself hurt or worse. Because we've lost a number of storm chasers over the last couple of years, and sometimes it's in a couple of instances. I believe it was actually related to storm chasing. They were just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time and got into a car accident, whatever. But just please exercise caution and exercise some common sense. If it looks, if something in your gut tells you you shouldn't be doing it, follow what your gut says. I'm a firm believer in that. Instincts are good. If they're telling you not to do something, don't do it. We want you alive. There'll always be another storm to chase.
Precisely. So we'll be back tomorrow night at 7:30, and we'll have a lot more to say about Ian. Thank you so much, everybody, for the 143 likes we managed to get tonight, Joe.
And over 1,054 views. Thank you. By the way, this show will be available on as a podcast shortly. I just have to load it up there. So if you haven't seen the whole show and you just have time to maybe listen to it or listen to it overnight or tomorrow morning, maybe you use it to put to sleep. Just go to your favorite place where you find podcasts like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're there somewhere under the Joe and Joe Weather Show. Good night, everybody.
Nighty night, folks. Let's go Mets.